Good afternoon. Thank you. Let me start with a couple of questions to the audience. I want to know from a macro level perspective, who works primarily on enterprise apps? Show of hands. Oh, minority here. Good. Consumer apps? How many hands showed up? Both enterprise and consumer apps. Okay. If you work in consumer apps or enterprise apps, what apps do you work on? Rhetorical question. Anyway, from a macro level approach, also design process, who would describe, also by show of hands, a browser-based first, not mobile-first approach? Browser-based first, primary experience, minority. Okay, mobile first. What about that? Just a handful of hands. What about equal weight of browser-based applications and mobile applications? Ooh, nobody, just one. Okay, good. Thank you. That gives me a little bit of a sense of the audience and what we're dealing with. I want to start with a little story, and this takes me back to my undergrad days in industrial design school. I was completing my project, and I was very curious about finding out whether the product that I was designing met the actual target audience expectations. So that was the first time that I ran into the opportunity to create a paper prototype and do some very low fidelity validation. When it was time to defend the project in front of a reviewer panel, I presented the results. I showed how I adjusted the design based on the feedback and the data that I have received from the usability testing. And one of the jurors stood up and said, "Jose, tell me, why do you worry about that now?" And I, without missing a beat, I basically responded, "If not now that I have the time to learn, then when?" And at the same token, when you're in an enterprise environment, you don't have the chance to learn about mobile or adopt a mobile strategy later, because basically the time and the opportunity is really now. Back in 2009, Luke Wroblewski, which I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with, designer who's now part of Google, coined the term mobile first. Shortly after that, in the Mobile World Conference, Eric Schmidt, in his keynote address, he talked about the future of enterprise apps and consumer apps in general in terms of mobile experience. And he basically categorized it into three key aspects: computational power, the connectivity and the portability of the connectivity, as well as the context of use for people. He went ahead and added the fact that developers and designers like to work on mobile applications because they were the best apps that you could create. And he said that the top-notch developers and designers would be very much likely be involved in mobile projects. So basically, the question here, or the point here, is to highlight the importance of mobile apps over the last 5 to so years. Just to give you a little bit of a data perspective, when you look at world population and you compare it with the most popular social media applications, over the last 2 or 3 years, you see between 6 and 8 of the most popular social networks, equaling or surpassing the population of the largest countries in the world. These are really staggering numbers. And I want you to basically take away the fact that the reality of mobile on a connected digital world is basically with us, and it's with us to stay. It's not going to go away. I'm going to now show you just a couple more data points before I tell you, kind of the key lessons that I learned. But basically, this study from a company that does world digital data shows that digital connected people own more than 3 devices. You can think it pretty easily: a laptop, a smartphone, and a tablet. And that's just in average around the world for digitally connected people. From a mobile workforce perspective in the US, 97% of mobile workforce are connected via a smartphone or tablets at the very least. So the opportunities, whether you are in enterprise software or in other type of applications, are very, very big. And I think these last data points, which I just encountered this week in my Twitter feed, by the year 2025, which is basically less than 10 years from now, the estimated number is that about 150,000 new connected devices of Internet of Things, IoT, are going to be tapping onto corporate networks, devices that may not even exist today. So these opportunities are gigantic. In terms of the context and really the heart of my conversation with you today, a few years ago I had the opportunity to work with a Fortune 500 company, large enterprise organization, on the first mobile product. That meant that up to that point, we were basically what I opened my questions with. We were a browser first, desktop first type of company culture and design and development culture, and we were facing basically the land of the unknown. We were starting our first mobile application. We didn't have a mobile strategy to begin with. So what I'm going to share with you today are the 8 lessons that we learned in that journey. And I have actually supplemented some of those lessons learned based on my consulting experience with different clients. The first thing that I consider the most important is to build a strong foundation strategy. And that foundation strategy really has 3 pillars. And those are people, technology, and process. Let me walk you through some of the key elements of that definition of the mobile strategy. From an organizational enablement perspective, you have to have a strong executive support. The CEO, the higher the better. Basically, the CEO, the board, CMO, the CIO, those are the kind of sponsors that you want behind your mobile project. You also want to have a leadership infrastructure in place. What that means is you need to have a leader who's accountable for executing the mobile strategy. The person who will, when it is the time to make the hard decisions, that person is going to call the shots. And also, when it is time to resolve some problems, basically the buck is going to stop in that person. And last but not least, in terms of organizational enablement, and probably many of you are familiar with these, either through your own experience or where you have observed, is the talent. If you were a desktop-based kind of shop, now you need to enhance the skills and train your own people inside the organization, whether they're designers, developers, or product managers. And you also need to bring people from the outside that actually have the chops, the experience that you're looking for. I think the last point there, a word of advice is that don't hesitate, don't be shy of bringing outside help, like a consulting firm that will help you out and get started. The second aspect is around technology, and basically defining what are the key elements of or characteristics of your strategy. Are you going to go iOS route, Android route? Do you have to support both? Are you going to go web app with basically almost native app-like behavior, but with HTML and JavaScript and some toolkits to support it? Or are you going to go with a hybrid model where you have basically a native container with some native features, also serving some web content through your application. So all these questions need to be answered before you basically draw your first mock-up, your first sketch of an application, before you write the first line of code. But you know how it works in enterprise environment. Everybody's itching to create the first design, create the first line of code to prove that they can be up to par to deliver on the new work that's ahead. And I think another aspect is the definition of the technology stack. Are you going to use UI toolkit like jQuery, AngularJS, or for example, some of the controls that Infragistic produces? Are you going to use Hadoop and Node.js? So all of these questions about technology have to be answered because those are going to determine the talent that you're going to need and also the infrastructure, if you host your own applications, that are going to be required to support the work that you're doing. Last but not least, and probably the most important of them all, is the process definition of your strategy. If you're going from a desktop-based or browser-based approach to a mobile-first as a whole culture transformation, just like Google did, 6 years ago, you have to basically enable a culture transformation program, and your executive team needs to make sure that they are willing to take a big bang approach. I don't promote a big bang approach in terms of innovation, but I do promote it in terms of culture transformation. Because if you take a piecemeal approach to culture transformation, guess what? Your piecemeal approach is going to go up and transform, and then other pieces of the organization or those teams that you are moving on from or moving away from are going to fall back to the way they're used to do things. Another key aspect is, depending on the complexity of your product suite or your product ecosystem, are you going to go with one app to the App Store, or are you going to produce many apps by either by country or by functional area or by business unit? Those are the kind of answers that you need to know and clearly define before you actually embark on your enterprise mobile journey. I have heard this way too many times, where I meet with the chief product officer of a startup, and he goes like, "Oh, Jose, don't worry, we have our mobile all settled down. It renders in the tablet." You would be surprised as to how many people actually think that that is the solution to your mobile strategy. Have you thought about optimizing and prioritizing the information that you have to present to the user? Have you optimized data entry? Are you taking advantage of all the features of the mobile device? And the answer is clearly not. So a big warning, please fight this attitude as hard as you can, because it is super critical that you don't let your mobile strategy up to chance of maybe it's going to work. Traditionally, and this is a criticism on my own work and many of the enterprise application environments, we have grown accustomed to abuse the user. And let me explain. Basically, 10, 15 years ago, enterprise software solutions were driven by a big price tag, long-term license fees, and very heavy capital investment from companies. However, at that point, the end users really didn't have a voice in the issue. Fast forward to today, we have software as a service, SaaS applications, and they're driven by usage and adoption. If you screw the users at that level, believe me, they will let the world in social media know that your enterprise application sucks. The last point that I'm going to talk about this one, a while ago, the CEO of Infor stood up in front of his clients and basically he declared enterprise application sucks. but he was actually prepared to also unveil the fact that he was creating a digital studio within his organization called Hook and Loop to actually be able to resolve that problem and create and deliver applications to the marketplace that were going to be enjoyable and could deliver a good experience to use. I think now moving on to the people that we're designing for and the personas that we're targeting. We have to be very, very clear as to who the audience of our products is. We need to make sure that we are able to address their expectations, not only their expectations and their needs, but the moment in which they need them. May not be quite the elevator moment that Justin was talking about, but in terms of the product, if they're going to go in and into the app and check the balance of their account, or whether they had vacation time available, they might do it in the elevator for all I care. So what is that moment in which they need, and the context in which they need that information available to them. The other thing, and I alluded to this just a minute ago, the organizational impact. As I mentioned, the mind shift going from we have all this real estate where we pack hundreds of features into a desktop browser app, going all the way down to a smaller form factor where we really have to make tough decisions and prioritize what is it we're going to deliver to the user in that context. We also have to consider the engagement factor, which I mentioned. When you are in a SaaS pay as you use type of model, if the user doesn't go to your app, your company is going to suffer revenue loss or lack of revenue. And the last aspect is really about the fact, and I think Justin alluded to this in his presentation, the fact that there's going to be we have to be fully aware of the fact that we're delivering a multi-channel experience. 5 minutes ago, I was working with my mobile. In the next 5 hours, I'm working with my desktop. And in the evening, I'm working in my tablet while I'm watching, the Yankees game. And all in the context of the same day, the same user, different environment, but the same application set or enterprise products that I need to interact with. Another big lesson that we learned is about the fact that we need to really tighten the collaboration between user experience, product managers and business owners, and technology. In one of the cases that I got the chance to work with, we started with a wish list from product management that included over 150 features for a smartphone application. After a lot of iterations and a lot of negotiation and putting those to the grind in terms of matching them with the personas that we were targeting, the user stories that we were creating, we were able to filter that list down to 10%. Between 10 to 15 features of that original, very long list made sense for the form factor that we were delivering and the actual context of use and the people that we were targeting. So I think it is super, super critical that as you are able to negotiate and navigate that feature selection, that you put that information to a tough test. I also want to highlight another aspect that I like to call the macroaggressions. And this is not about really revenue, but about how we treat the users. I don't know if you ever experienced the door of that application closes on you because you're not using the right browser, you're not using the right device for the company, but it is yours, so you want to access the application. What about your flash needs to be updated type of thing? And we need to move away from those macroaggression moments to micro interactions where we deliver the maximum value possible to the people that we're serving with our products and services. And we give them the maximum value while we ask them for the lowest effort and the lowest number of taps. For example, if I'm talking about a phone app, 2 or 3 taps to get to the information that I'm needing, to finish the transaction, to do the task that I'm targeting with. So I want you to really think about that, because I observe it in enterprise environments all the time. Another key aspect, and this is something that for those who are in technology in the room, and for those of us who are not in technology but need to be fully aware of these, technology standards are super critical. I call it, the API contract. If you have a large number of apps, more than a handful, or even if it is just a handful, you need to have clearly defined standards and contracts that the information that you're going to put into that mobile app can be scaled up, can be replaced between modules. You plug the module for a company that you just acquired, and because it adheres or it delivers on that API contract, you can actually plug it right into your app. So those are the kind of things that that we need to work on. Recently, I was in a panel in New York City where the CTO of Kaiser Permanente stood up in front of the audience, and he talked about the fact that they have 7,000 partners in their ecosystem. And every partner in that ecosystem knows that if they don't, well, let me put it in a positive manner. Every partner in that ecosystem knows that they have to adhere to the enterprise architecture standards of that organization if they want to be and continue being part of that ecosystem. So the takeaway from you or for you is you may not have to deal with 100 products, you may not have 7,000 partners, but you still need to make sure that your organization clearly define those technology standards in a manner that you can scale, you can replace and interchange modules, and you can expand in the future. And I think it was day 6 of the mobile experience creation where Ivan and Andy were talking about analytics. You were right, analytics only give us certain health checkups about the application. Is it performing? What areas are the users going? How many modules of your app are they visiting? Which ones are they not using? And those kind of insights are just going to feed your design, your development, and your overall product development process as you further evolve your mobile application. From a design perspective, which is probably the part that is closer to the work that I do, but as you can tell, I have to move and feel comfortable navigating and speaking the business and technology language. But from a design perspective, we need to make sure that everybody in the team, whether it's the development group, the product manager, the business owner, or the designer, everybody has a clear understanding of the vision and the blueprint of the application. And from a practical perspective, make sure that we design, prototype, and validate as quickly as possible so we can learn what's going on. And being intellectually curious is actually something that helps every application, not just in mobile. But if you're in a mobile environment and you're actually facing your first application, you need to ask questions as to why do we need to do these? How are we going to do it? What kind of applications do we like in the market that are applicable to us? What is the competition is doing? What is outside of our industry altogether where we can draw some inspiration? So, before closing, I just want to kind of recap, these were the 8 lessons that I collected for you today. Everything from starting at the foundation level definition, all the way down to defining the experience and always asking the questions that we need to ask. And I just want to close the presentation today with this takeaway. The race for mobile is real, but you don't want to crash and burn in the process. You want to make sure that you are uncovering new ideas, eliminating bad ideas in the process, and prioritizing the right ideas to deliver the best user experience. Thank you very much.
Questions for Jose? Really? Oh. Everybody's talking about it. All right.
What about you? Well, I have to put the racing one there just for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Yes. What?
Thanks. That was a great presentation. So, the question is if there's an enterprise app, a system that's been pretty much has a lot of legacy stuff that's been built over years, a multi-generational app. How do you kind of bring that experience, especially with the amount of baggage carries onto mobile? Because one of the bigger problems with mobile is for streamlining processes to make them so lightweight that can be accommodated in a couple of user interactions to service the need of the user. So that's a big challenge from porting very large enterprise apps onto mobile screen.
Yeah, I think in terms of scale and context, there are some things that probably will remain in a desktop application, heavy transactional, heavy data entry type of applications. But when you look at some of the things the team was talking about, the days of creation, don't make me type. If I can identify you by knowing that you have your smartphone, which is registered or has been already identified with the system, if we know where you are because of geolocation, if we know what tasks are important to you, we push them out to you instead of having you have to dig for them. So it's about the context and how we can leverage the power of the device and the features that the device has to make that interaction the lowest effort possible with the highest value that we can deliver. Thank you very much.